wasn't until the last few years where I really started to expand my horizons when it came to the film I shot. I'd done plenty of Fuji Superia because they sold that at my retail job, and I'd done a little bit of Kodak Ultramax 400, albeit many years expired, but I had never shot true black and white film or cinema film. The first time I had ever even heard of cinema film was at my retail job when the lab manager came up and informed us that we are not to accept anything from Seattle Filmworks. Now, despite the fact that they had been defunct for several years, apparently that didn't stop a roll from showing up at a location and gumming up and doing a number on the film processor. That's because cinema film has what's called remjet. It's a layer that goes on the non-emulsion side of the film that is supposed to reduce static and halations on film while it's running through a cinema camera. For a long time now, there's been an industry around taking cinema film and trimming it for use with 35mm cameras and in 120 format. This is because the film is usually bought in large quantities, so when it's trimmed down for photo use, it's significantly cheaper than a lot of photographic films. The only catch with it is that it's a little bit more difficult to process than regular C41 film. Labs that do it are kind of few and far between compared to labs that do C41. Doing it at home isn't too difficult, but removing that remjet is not always the easiest. Cinema film is also referred to as ECN2. Now, ECN stands for Eastman Color Negative, and this is Kodak's process for developing their cinema film. I shot a roll of Reflex Lab 500T, which is respooled cinema film, and I filmed the process to show you what it's all about. The first step is dealing with the remjet layer. I use this Flic Film kit, which comes with a pre-bath that you let the film soak in. This loosens up the remjet layer, and the vast majority of it will come off with just a few rinses. Alternatively, you can use warm water and baking soda for this. After you've rinsed it out, the next step is the developer. You start with continuous inversions for 10 seconds and then 4 every 30 seconds, and you'll do this for about 3 minutes. Pour the developer back, and the next step is the stop bath. Pour in the stop bath, invert once, and you let it sit for 30 seconds. This stops the development process and kills off any of the remaining developer that could interact with the bleach and stain your film. So you fill and drain 3 times, and now it's time for the bleach. This step is virtually identical to the developer step. Pour in continuous inversions for the first 10 seconds and then 4 every 30 seconds for 3 minutes. Then again, fill and drain 3 times. Next step is the fixer. Same thing with this, continuous inversions for 10 seconds and then 4 every 30 seconds, but only for 2 minutes. Then it's on to the final rinse. The instructions do say to leave it under running water for 5 minutes, but it strikes me as pretty wasteful. A lot of other kits that I've used suggest to drain and rinse about 8 times, so that's typically what I end up doing. The last step in the process is one that I do struggle with. Once you hang up the negatives to dry, it's recommended that you do a final wipe to remove the last little bit of the remjet. I've read online that people have success using PEG pads, which is just a lint-free photo-specific wipe. But like an idiot, I ended up using a shop towel. I did get most of the remjet, but I also scratched my negatives pretty bad, and I ended up spending a few hours in Photoshop trying to remove the scratches. So hopefully you learned from my mistake of using shop towel on negatives, and in the future I'm going to give PEG pads a try. If you do want to shoot cinema film, I recommend going with Flic Film or Reflex Lab, as I have right here. Reflex Lab respools in 120, whereas Flic Film only does 35mm. Unfortunately, Kodak is looking to crack down on respoolers, so we don't know exactly who it'll affect and how it will affect them, but we can hope that the market isn't just going to end up being cine still and they gouge us for the rest of our lives.